I mean, when I first saw it in the movie theater...
This joke is not funny anymore.
Two blood brothers, out for each other. The firstborn brother, they called him Voltan, the devil's agent, the servant of evil. The second-born brother, they called him Hawk. He had one secret weapon, the ancient power of the Sword of Mind, and he was out for revenge. Two brothers, two armies, two forces of good and evil. Voltan's army, the Devil's army, and Hawk's, a dwarf, a giant, an elfin bowman, a witch, and Hawk. Together, they took on the mighty Voltan. Together, they took on the Devil's agent. Two blood brothers, with only blood between them.
The Hardcast.
It's time for another fantastically generic episode of the Hardcast. I'm your host, Chris, and today I'm joined by Patrick.
Drogo.
Tonight's review/discussion is about the 1980 sword and sorcery cult film, Hawk, the Slayer, directed by Terry Marcel, written by Harry Robertson and Terry Marcel, music by Harry Robertson, starring Jack Palance and John Terry. The wicked Voltan kills his father, but before the old man dies, he bequeaths to his other son, Hawk, a magical sword. Hawk vows to avenge his father and kill Voltan. Hawk assembles a band of heroes consisting of a giant, a dwarf, an elf, a crossbowman, and a blind witch. Together they set out to stop Voltan from continuing his evil ways. So Patrick, did Hawk the Slayer give you a rapid-fire understanding of loyalty, camaraderie, and the power of light over darkness? Or did you feel like you were stabbed in the back by a whiny nun?
This movie was rubbish. What can I say about this movie? I thought it was a show. I thought it was.
Well, you kept turning around to me and going, "If this is a show, then I understand."
I thought for sure it was just some show.
It's like if this is a pilot for a series that failed.
I can imagine it being on like BBC or something like some other channel. Or
well,
like
it wasn't a very British show. There was all the British actors in it, except for I guess Jack Palance and the main guy, whatever his name was.
John Terry.
Yeah, John Terry. He was so forgettable.
Maybe the elf guy, I guess. I don't know. I couldn't tell.
I don't know what actor he was, but there were a couple people in this movie that I remember seeing in other things that were much better.
Yeah, like the innkeeper dude who was in Brothers, Sherlock Holmes' younger brother.
Yeah, it was so funny because the moment I saw him, I thought, "Oh, is that him?" We were so bored or not into the movie that we were just looking for things to talk about. We're like, "Oh, it's the guy from that Sherlock Holmes movie."
He actually had the best acting, like in the whole movie. That one scene where he's like,
"We had the best comedic timing." And the way he rolled his eyes was much more convincing than anybody else's performance. But yeah, I guess you should just start out with the opening sequence.
The opening sequence where Voltan is talking to his father or something like that, and he says, "Give me the secret. I'm the eldest. Tell me what the secret is." And he's like, "No, it's not for you," or some shit like that. And then he's like, "Well, I guess the secret's gonna die with you then." And he kills his father, and then he runs away like a pussy.
Well, I have to mention too that everybody who gets stabbed in this movie by a sword, there's no blood.
Yeah, there's no blood. Everybody's sword is clean.
There's not even a hole in the clothes.
Everybody's sword is clean, and on top of that, a lot of people's swords are bent. I don't know why they're bent. Not
made with cheap British pop metal, whatever. I don't know.
If this offends
aluminium.
If this offends you and you're from Britain, please comment. So John Terry or Hawk comes in. He's like, "Oh, Papa, you're dying," and then Papa is
a very unconvincing performance.
Yeah, he's like, "Hawk, come here." He's like, "My eye, the darkness takes my eye. My limbs, please hurry." Everybody's so long-winded when they die. It's ridiculous. He's like, "I need to show you the secret." And that scene with the glowing rock, and I didn't quite understand it, but there's a hand, and then the glowing rock goes to the hand, and then it closes it. But the hand always looks like some guy with a glove. So the hand becomes like a sword. He tells his son, "Hawk, think of the sword in your hand." And then he does, and the sword just jumps to him. He says it will appear, but really it just hovers to him.
Well, yeah, it just looks like it's floating in the air because it's being held up by strings.
And he can do all sorts of things like throw it and whatever. That's not part of it right now. That's later.
But he does the coolest stuff against people he didn't need to do that stuff to. And then when it comes time when he really needs that ability, he doesn't use it.
Yeah. There's certain scenes where people just die. a whole bunch of people just dying. It's like badass. And then the rest of the movie, the movie is just garbage.
I have to say, though, in the beginning, I would say the first 15 or so minutes, I was really wondering, why did I rent this movie from Netflix? I heard semi-good things about it, and the artwork was pretty badass on the DVD cover. And then we start getting into the whole thing where he has to try and stop Voltan. He assembles his crew, and he has a history with them. Then I'm like, oh, okay, this is straight-up Dungeons & Dragons, Fellowship of the Ring type stuff. This is a little bit more interesting.
So we start off with a guy who's hurt, and he gets to a monastery.
His name is Ranulph.
And he's just dragging his ass over there, and then the nuns keep bring him in, and they say, "Oh, you're a pussy for not dying, but we'll take care of you, heal him." And they have to cut off his hand, his left hand, and turns out he's a good archer. Not really an archer,
crossbowman.
A crossbowman. Some badass cartridges for it.
Yeah, it looks like the crossbow from Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust.
So it's like a rapid fire crossbow. So,
well, he tells the nun all about Voltan and how he kills women and children and he destroyed this village and he's the only survivor. At this point, we're like, oh, okay, Voltan's the guy from the beginning. He's become this crazy badass destroying villages, Conan style. But you never actually see him do anything like that in the whole movie. Yeah, he's a jackass and he kills people, but he doesn't wipe out whole villages in the movie. You just hear about it. You don't ever actually see it.
Yeah, it's not really him. He kind of just lets people do whatever they want. Basically, they do what they want, which is killing people, raping people, and taking their shit.
Voltan shows up at the nunnery or the freaking temple or whatever. I don't know what religion they have in this land because they never even tell the name of the land or the world they're in or what year it is or anything like that. But whatever, it's generic fantasy land. He shows up, kidnaps the abbess, which is, I guess, the head nun, and wants 2,000 in gold, kidnapper's ransom. Ranulph wants to go out and stop Voltan because he fucked up. He could have shot him when he didn't. He gets stabbed. But like you said, he's like the fucking pincushion in the movie.
He's got his in the sights. He's got him in the sights, and he just doesn't pull the trigger. And he gets in the Voltan is like, "Oh fuck you!" And he throws like a throwing knife at him, which is, by the way, Voltan's specialty, throwing knives. Throws it at him, and he gets him, and he's just he gets hurt again. What the fuck?
It's so stupid. He had, like you said, he had him in his sights. All he had to do was pull the trigger, and Voltan has to pull out a knife and throw it. And this whole time, Ranulph never gets one shot off. Ranulph, what the hell's wrong with you? Well, of course, it would have been a really short movie if he had.
Fucking pussy and deserter. I mean, he ran away from his village being burned down. I mean, really. He gets messed up. And of course, they're like saying, we have to get our abbess back. We have to get her back. How are we going to get the gold? Yeah. You have to go to the headmaster or head minister or whatever his name is.
That guy tells him about a man named Hawk and does a lot of, he helps him out from time to time.
But he's bleeding to death, and they're like, oh, go! You have to go to the head. He's like bleeding, he's got like a fucking knife in his chest, and they're like, oh, you should go see the...
But he heals quickly. You never see the wound again.
And of course, that lovely music, what he's running around, that lovely disco fantasy music.
Well, I should say the music in this movie is probably the most memorable thing about it. Not that it's good or anything, but that it's just so crazy. It's just a mix of a whole bunch of different styles all at the same time.
Weirdness. So he learns about Hawk, and the guy's saying, well, you'll have to go to this forest, blah, 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 to get Hawk. And he has to go get Hawk.
Well, and Hawk is looking for Voltan at this time, so...
And then Hawk comes across a woman, a witch, who's about to be burned.
Yeah.
Of course, the guys are all assholes. Everybody in this whole fucking country is an asshole. They're like, who are you, and what do you want?
The way I see it is, it's a bunch of forests, a bunch of fog, bad weather, a bunch of assholes just running around. It sounds like England.
Harry is so bitter. And then they're like, well, this witch is going to burn. And he's like, well, how do you know she's guilty of anything? Really, what happens is he probably would have let them if they weren't such assholes and tried to kill him. He saves her life, and of course she's like, I'm indebted to you. And then she's like, I'm blind, but not really. She's got this scarf over her eyes, and with a picture of an eye on it. So she's not really blind, but she's like, I'm indebted to you, and come with me. Then she tells him about the one-handed man, which is Ranulph.
Yeah.
He's looking for him. So he's like, well, I have to find this one-handed man. He will lead me to Voltan. So he goes finds Ranulph. And I really don't remember the rest.
Ranulph is in the forest, remember, and he runs into those bandits.
You're right.
They try to kill him, and he kills one of them, and then they get all upset, because they're like, oh, yeah, you killed our friend, now we have to really hurt you. And he's like, your friend was going to kill me. What the hell is I supposed to do? It was just self-defense. So they start playing this stupid game where they're throwing axes at him, and they're trying to see who can get the closest without actually cutting him, and then, whatever, they're making bets on it. That's when Hawk shows up, rescues him. After that, Ranulph is with him, tells him everything about Voltan. So he's in balls deep now, because he wants to get Voltan. And then, the witch says, yeah, I can help you find your other friends, because he's trying to get his other friends, a dwarf, a giant, an elf. all of them to help him.
Standard fantasy characters.
Merry band of fantasy heroes. Of course, she does her magic.